but we think it is pretty good. Meeting is being live streamed. What? People are listening to this or could listen to it? Help us. Thank you, Joyce. Well, what are the issues? You think of some things that are controversial. Should be easy, I guess.
They just named a
Just
couple.
so many, where do
Yeah.
you want to start?
Right.
Yeah.
There's abortion. I
Yeah.
mean, there's political parties in general. You can name every
There's
issue.
how we treat people who are not white Americans.
Yeah.
Or who aren't like us in some
Yeah.
way. Mhm.
There's how we treat people who are white Americans who aren't in our same geographic region or
Mhm.
economic class.
Yeah,
or-
economics is a big part of it.
Sexuality.
Sexual, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
And thinking of sexuality, of course, you've got issues of homosexuality. Things that we used to feel real strongly about have dropped out. We don't worry about divorce anymore. And divorce and remarriage, which used to be a huge issue for American Christians, that's kind of dropped out. But homosexuality, transsexual stuff. I don't know how all of a sudden drag shows became a big issue. Just one thing, they're fun.
have you ever been to one? You just walked by
I
one.
walked by one and I thought we were in Oak Park and we gone with some friends and we had dinner. We were walking back to our car in downtown Oak Park. It was a drag show going on. I thought, that's kind of surprising. It was just right there, windows open. But I thought, okay, why not? But I mean,
You
how
were
did
gonna
that
say
be?
something.
Each his own.
Yeah, that's how I was raised,
Yeah.
but apparently not everybody.
Well, I think immigration is a
Yeah,
big thing
immigration
that
is.
it's really big now and how we treat immigrants and our views toward undocumented persons and, all of those things are a huge
It
issue.
seems whenever there's a change, there's always a reaction to it,
Mhm.
Mhm.
one way or the other way. You
Mhm.
know?
That sounds like science, right? To every action, there's a reaction.
I was thinking of that right away.
Hmm?
For every action, there's an equal opposite.
Yeah,
A scientist.
Thank goodness it's help us with that.
Well, to your point too about everything being political, like in a sense, everything has to be political.
yeah,
Because these
even
are
George
things-
said that.
These are
Remember,
things
yeah.
where the government has to play a role
Yeah.
in dictating what's normal or how taxpayer dollars are allocated. Like issues of immigration or even abortion kind of have to be political in the
Mhm.
sense that there have to be decisions made by
Right.
politicians and laws passed.
Mhm.
But there's this spirit of deep division and opposition to the point where it almost feels like we're not really picking options. Sometimes we might even just be looking at the other side,
Yeah,
saying, well, they believe that. Okay, well, my camp
Yeah.
automatically has to do the
right,
180-degree,
yeah,
Yeah,
that's good.
and we're not listening to each other either.
Yeah.
Right, we kind of talk at each other.
that's what's being modeled for us on
Mhm.
TV. You know,
Well, there's also a good thing in that if we all, if one side overwhelmed the other, they can become, autocratic, dictator,
Mhm.
they're, in a way, we protect each other. I think this country, from my understanding, that two-party system was supposed to work so that things got balanced out.
Right,
And I could see where one party in different issues became vitriolic and it became, I'm not even going to name the party, but I became appalled at how people were calling each other names.
Mhm.
And I suppose either party can do that. If you
That's
don't
true.
agree with me, then you are a racist, a homophobic,
Right,
on and on and on. And when people start doing that, they are completely ignoring the whole issue at hand.
In my opinion, it got worse um,
In our lifetime, certainly.
Yeah.
right, and
Become more
usually,
divided.
in the past, I think we've had presidents who haven't name called, but our most recent past president name called, and that was shocking for somebody in that position, I thought, you know,
We never
and I
seen
kind of
presidents
thought that
behave
when he
like that.
actually took office, maybe he like toned down, but that didn't happen. And
Be presidential.
Well, a
Right.
lot of it is because our equipment allows people to hear, to read the whole world, to read what you're thinking.
Yeah.
If you write it down.
I think media is. the
There
big part of
probably
it.
always was name calling, but we just didn't know.
Yeah, just look at some of the campaign, Lincoln versus Douglas, some of the things that were said
Oh, yeah.
in the newspapers. that
Nasty.
Really
Used to be
portrayed out
fired.
very just nasty, really nasty stuff. But I think that you really
Yeah.
tapped into it. That's why I have a real jaundiced view of quote unquote social media. I'm not
Right.
part of it whatsoever, but I think it just fosters echo chambers, as they call it. and all
It
the rest of
does,
It's
yeah.
really a disaster.
yeah, you only hear the opinions of people who have the same opinions as you. and
Or
so
if you're an
then-
extremist, you get a much bigger audience today than you would say in 1950.
Yeah.
I mean, you were really out, middle of
Yeah,
nowhere now.
that's right.
Mhm.
Then you draw out the weirdos.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had Walter Cronkite
Yeah,
instead of Sprague.
everybody thought Walter Cronkite was reliable, trustworthy. I
Well-
think he
well,
was. I
and
don't
You
know.
when Theo was here, he mentioned,
I do know about.
Walter who?
No, we've heard of Walter
Never heard of
Cronkite.
it, no.
I didn't watch any of his news broadcasts, but we heard
Yeah.
about it. Yeah,
well, when Theo was here, he mentioned the fairness doctrine,
Yeah.
which was
Mhm.
part of
It was part of the
the
legal.
news
Yeah.
requirement that you present balanced views, you know, and in spite of, you know, news people saying that they're balanced, we're not really seeing that, you
Right,
know, it's
yeah.
like now I, because I'm on social media and I have people that think like me on social
Oh,
media.
yeah.
And so, you know, like,
Oh, yeah. Gives
like-
you power.
no, but like people,
Okay.
like CNN interviewed Trump, had a town hall. And I'm like, you know, and people have very strong reactions. Like I've never really watched CNN, so I don't care one way or the other, but I'm like, people are like, I'm never going to watch CNN again. And I'm, you know, and I'm like, well, you know, but
Yeah.
don't we believe all people should have a platform?
Mm.
You know, but
So
Mhm.
to your point though, so media has been doing this for a long time. Social media kind of takes it, and puts it on steroids. Which is
Right.
that
Yeah, yeah.
outrage drives engagement.
Right.
So
Mhm.
people were complaining about the CNN town hall, but that means they watched it.
that's right.
So for the people that own CNN, they don't really give a rip about
Right.
the platform necessarily, so long
Mm-hmm.
as it doesn't get them in too much trouble, right? I mean, Fox just had to pay out
Right, millions of
$787 million, but so what? They their viewers are still yeah, so that, but like I agree with what you're saying about the danger of what social media does that TV can't necessarily is intruding into your day-to-day life.
Right.
So then all you're consuming is biased media and you're
Mhm.
you're in a brine.
Yeah,
Yeah, I even noticed that for myself. I get targeted ads and I go,
Mhm.
wait a second, why am I only seeing ads for this guy? Or sometimes I'll get a weird thing in my YouTube feed and I go, what did I watch that made YouTube think I would want to watch this
Right.
guy?
Mm,
And I didn't really think of YouTube as social media, but it's still got an algorithm. It's still trying to get me to stay on the website for as long as possible.
mhm,
And that doesn't mean it's gonna send me stuff I like, it means it's gonna send me stuff I'm gonna react to,
Right.
mm.
which is very different. Yeah,
And therein starts another problem of how our views and our opinions are formed by social media. We no
Mhm.
longer we no longer go outside of it for information.
And just like social media is quick, I think that people's reaction time becomes really quick too. They don't sit and think and dwell
Wonder,
on
does
the
that make
issues.
sense? Yeah.
It's more reactive.
Mhm. Not sure what I meant by that, but who are we as Americans? Well, 60.1% of us are white, not Hispanic. I must confess, I am white, not Hispanic.
You are?
Well, Polish.
What?
Yeah.
That's what?
Then a large percentage, I mean, considering that they're more recent in America, 18.5% are Hispanic. And blacks have been pretty much about 12% for a long, long time. And they're not really predicted to grow a lot or shrink a lot. They're, you know, Asian 5.6. Multiple races. Who are the prettiest? In my opinion, 2.8%. American Indian and Alaska Native, less than 1%. And we heard about how 99% of them were killed since white people came
Yeah.
here. And then Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, 0.2%, although a lot more in Hawaii.
Yeah, of course.
So that you can see it on a chart here, whites are the largest group, and followed by Hispanics, followed by blacks, Asians, and then Native peoples are multi-race. But you see it pictorially. I mean, white people are still the majority, but that's not predicted to stay true for very much longer. And that's going to freak white people out. It is freaking white people
Yeah,
out. I think.
yeah, I think that's something we need, everyone needs to pay attention to.
So that's what, 20 years from now?
Somewhere in there, yeah. Yeah, we're expected to be a minority,
And yet we already are a minority because we aren't just white.
right?
You
Yeah.
know, we're all,
So who is the majority? By 2060, it's expected that non-Hispanic whites, that is people like me, will drop from 60.1 to 44.3%, which means we'll be a minority.
I would imagine that depends on where you are too.
Yeah,
Like if you're in North Dakota.
right.
or
Yeah, you
whatever.
may not see it in some parts of the country, other parts it'll be more
and
obvious.
it's still a majority of the group
Right,
compared to other groups, like no other
Yeah.
single group
is
Could be
that
as
big?
large.
has, right?
But
Yeah,
all
so
these
we-
other groups will be larger.
Yeah. But as a.
Well, not all, of them.
We'll be the largest minority group,
Black.
but,
Black's not gonna change much.
and that does arouse
It's been like
emotions, I think, for
12%,
people.
Oh, it is.
I think, you know, those of us who are a little older, I mean, we've just always thought that white people were kind of the majority in America. And when they're not, I think that's gonna upset people. Because we don't want to be treated the way we've treated minorities, right? So I'm afraid that we might get turned around on us or something.
I don't think you and I have to worry about it.
Yeah. And by 2060, well, they can be here. I don't know, probably not. But my memory will live on, and I think that's the important thing.
That's it. Yeah.
So already whites are a minority in California, only 36%.
Oh.
And in DC, 37%. Hawaii, 39% are white. And for Asian and Puerto Rico, I'm sorry, they're Asian, and Puerto Rico is 98% Latin. As you might guess.
Yeah.
And they're an American province. So how do white people feel about the ethnic changes? And does it matter where you're situated in the socioeconomic?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, clearly
Yeah.
that's true. I don't perceive minorities as being any kind of threat to me. But I think in the lower socioeconomic classes, I think it literally is a threat to them.
Well, and maybe the way you grew up, it would have been a threat.
Yeah.
If you had, because you kind of moved out of
I
that.
jumped a few levels in the thing. But, yeah, when you're working class, you're closer to that, and you're more likely to feel you're in competition. And I think that becomes a big issue for a lot of people.
Well, I think you should talk about competition for what?
Resources.
Resources,
For jobs.
Yeah,
Jobs
well,
and
for
also,
jobs, but
power.
I don't envision the leadership of our country, meaning the top positions in government in our country changing at quite the same pace, which I'm concerned leads to an underrepresentation for for what will then be the majority of
Increasing,
people.
yeah, minority, yeah.
mhm,
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Well-
already happening. Like, that's the whole, like, this might either be a tangent or it might be something, I'm stealing your thunder, one or the other.
Either way, it's fine.
But
whatever you do.
thinking about racial divisions and how those, in a sense, almost serve as a distraction from class divisions, from the different levels of
Mhm.
socioeconomic status. If you can keep poor white folks, and I think this was talked about in the history of whiteness lecture. If you
mhm,
can keep poor white folks focused on the fact that well, at least I'm white,
Right,
then they're not gonna be wondering about, gosh, why? Why do I have to stay at the bottom
yeah,
of the socioeconomic ladder? Because I'm told I can do anything
right.
in America. But that's, just as much a factor of your SES status as
Right.
your race, if not more. But if we can keep people angry and focused on the racial tension, which doesn't mean that race doesn't matter, it very much does matter. But it's like, who's benefiting from that conflict?
mhm.
It's always the people at the top. In this country, those people are pretty much all white.
Mhm.
Some people I've spoken with who have grown up in that in the white, lower economic state and
Mhm.
and are resistant to racial changes, leading to white people being a minority, are angry because they see other people they see people who aren't white as receiving benefits for being
Yeah.
not white.
Right, you hear that all the
Mhm.
time. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what the benefits are, but they always say that.
Well, it can be jobs or it could be, social programs that,
Some people are angry about affirmative action.
about what?
Affirmative action.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
And that anger is, so that anger, at least in the people I'm thinking of, results in them being bitter about their own situations, but also prideful in the way they've worked and like pulled themselves up by their bootstraps.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But they still don't want to help anyone else.
yeah. I've read things from parents who are upset because their very bright child with high test scores didn't get into an Ivy. And a minority, they perceive that minority students with lesser qualifications are getting in. But that's largely because they don't even understand how admissions and works at all, because statistically, it's really hard to get into an Ivy, no matter how smart you are and how perfect your test scores are, because they're limited, and
Well,
that-
there's another issue too. People like to blame something for their, because they're not, because of, that causes them to be where they are.
Right,
If I'm sick, it's somebody's fault. They got me sick.
Mhm.
If I can't get ahead, something else, something other than me is stopping me from getting ahead. It seems to be a naturally
Yes.
human response to situations that are uncomfortable, is to blame it on somebody else.
Mhm.
I believe that the whole definition of white versus black, this is increasingly, in my opinion, it just come over to me for many years. Was Barack Obama white or black? It to me is very arbitrary. He had a white, quote unquote, white mother. I worked when I worked for Amtrak, I was the minority, at least in the crafts that I was in. I was a white guy, old white guy, immersed in mostly black folks. And I worked with several black folks. One woman that in particular, she was one of the supervisors. She was as dark as that cabinet. I mean, she was not, she did, I don't know if she had any mixed heritage or not, but if you were to talk to her on the phone, you'd have no clue who she was or what she was about. She was educated, she was refined, but she could turn her dialect on and off depending on who she was talking to.
Right.
And to me, that said so much that what we define as black is more cultural than actually skin color.
Yeah. Well, that's right.
Well, you missed Theo's thing about whiteness, but,
Yeah.
but that was a lot of it, you know, that whiteness is really a construct,
It's a construct, exactly.
racist construct.
Yeah, race is a construct. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, if you look at gerrymandering, you know, and so that's a way to take a black population, for example, and string it out so that, you know, and not to say that one party does it and the other party doesn't. Both parties actually do this. They do that for to benefit. In Illinois,
Changing zoning.
yeah, what's his name?
ordinance, yeah, right.
Sure.
Adam Kinzinger just got gerrymandered out of his seat up in near Rockford there, Winnebago. But yeah, going back to when I was many years ago, when I was growing up and they passed the civil rights legislation and integration of schools and everything. Well, what happened there? I grew up in southern state Tennessee and there weren't that many blacks in our area at all. But if you take a city like Memphis or many major cities in the country, Chicago, the whole neighborhoods would change. So if Chicago was integrating, what did the whites do? Many of them moved out. And you had to get out soon, because if the neighborhood started changing, then your house value went way down.
Right, be very little for your house. And
Yeah, you had to get out and all that, and we're seeing now we're reaping the result of all this. It's, my gosh, these attitudes, they really never changed. They really didn't change, and we're seeing this.
I tend to believe that there's hope. Not an optimist by nature, I don't think, but when I see young people playing together or a young girl with a black guy, I didn't see that when I was a teenager.
No,
I
never,
did not
never.
see that. And I grew up in Philip Lombard and went to Willowbrook High School. Now it's very common, or if it's not very common, it's certainly not unusual.
Right.
So I think if we can survive our pollution or degradation of the planet, I think there's hope for humanity in that, in regards to race.
To
Because
your
I
point,
think young people see life differently than
Yeah, it's just that they do.
yeah, so when we look at the representation in media, it's
Oh,
changed
yeah,
quite a bit,
yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, there's outrage and reactionist stuff, but even the fact that like new Disney movies are coming out, they're re-releasing their old stuff because
Oh,
there's no
yeah.
such thing as an original idea
Yeah.
in Hollywood. But they keep recasting these roles with people of color.
Mhm.
And how that they're sort of forcing that normalization in a good way,
Yeah.
I think. But it is ticking some people off because they go, well, I grew up watching this film
Right.
and there was a white lead. And why do we have to have all these people of
Yeah.
color?
How
On
can
the
Ariel
screen.
be black? You know,
Right?
she's a redhead.
How do you, well, I mean, yeah,
That's the thing that I care about, like, anyone can have red hair.
but it's like she's a mermaid. She's not a human, like.
I know.
It's a
I
thing.
can't wait to see the new one.
Is
New
that the
Little
new-
Mermaid. I love a new Little
Yeah.
Mermaid's coming out with
It's live action.
live action.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, and Ariel is black.
Yeah, well,
And
she's,
Well, she's
yeah,
really-
African-American or something. yeah.
Melissa McCarthy is Ursula. I can't wait to see that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Flounder, really cute and animated. It's just a big dumb looking fish. Yeah.
Oh,
That was the biggest
Yeah.
disappointment when I saw that. Yeah.
He's always so cute. He's not cute at all. He's just
Well, maybe he'll be cute.
a loathsome fish. Yeah.
So to that point, like, I am hopeful, but it's also like, it's really sad to see because we have things like that in our media. And then we have like a white supremacy group meeting out in front of the Washington Monument, all wearing blue shirts and khaki pants and masks and upside down American flags. And so it's gonna, to me, I am hopeful, but I feel like it's gonna get worse before it gets better because we're seeing some really ugly stuff coming out.
Images.
Yeah. They'll look like they work at Best Buy. Like that was the uniform they chose. I mean, it's better than white robes and hoods, I guess, but
Well, that is true, isn't it?
Well,
yeah.
blue shirts and khaki pants are the business casual white collar men's uniform.
Yep. Pretty much.
Remember one day we were at Target and I was wearing a red polo.
Uh-oh.
And khakis, people
I couldn't
people
why
kept
they
asking
me.
for things.
Big mistake, yeah.
What's that mean?
Target people wear khakis and red shirts.
I didn't even think of it until like 5 or 6 people asked.
Everybody was coming up to him like, why are they asking you for?
Yeah.
And then they
Could have
do
the
a
answers.
target in the
Yeah.
back.
As well.
Did you get a discount?
I used to work for Target. You don't get a discount.
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, especially not just for coming dressed like you work at Target.
Yeah, like 5%. Yeah,
Yeah, 5% is pretty low.
yeah. It was pretty, anyway.
I mean, I get.
We get 5% because we have the red card.
I don't even bother with it. I get better, we almost get better credit card benefits than.
No, but the red card is not a credit card.
Oh, I
it's
know.
your
Yes,
debit.
we have the red card too. We just-
Yeah.
Use the account.
Yeah,
But anyway, that's a huge sidetrack.
yeah.
But sidetracks are fun. Now, we know that,
One of the divisions in white America is people who have the red card
yeah,
and people who don't have the red card.
I don't think it's really a division.
Oh, okay. Just,
Well, we missed that last one. Put that back up.
Yeah, Americans that we call white see the racial situation in the US very differently than Black people do. We look at the same reality, but we describe it differently.
and to Bill's point about why do people consider Barack Obama Black when he has a white mother and a Black father? It's that thing that
Going back,
happened,
yeah,
that one drop of Black blood makes you Black,
right.
which doesn't make sense really, does it?
If you have any kind of discernible Blackness, you are Black.
Features.
Yeah,
And my good friend who's of Haitian descent, she was born here, is very light. She considers herself Black or Haitian, but a lot of times people don't think
she
she's
says,
Black.
students say you're not Black.
There was a student, she was a counselor, and a student said that I was talked a lot about her really racist dad, and then she's like, I want you to meet my dad, and Natania's like, well, won't it bother him that I'm Black? And the student who she'd been counseling for months said, you're not Black. And Natania's like, yeah, I am. I'm Black. No, you're not Black.
Now, on the other hand, when she gave birth at the hospital, they knew she was Black. 'cause they-
Yeah, I was in the room when somebody came in and just kept telling her, well, you can get free healthcare through this and this, and you can do this. And Natania's like, well, I really have good insurance. I'm not worried about that. And then she kept pushing on like all of these resources for,
Not
and
listening
I
to
was
her.
in the room and I'm like, wanted to say, she has a PhD from Northwestern. Back off. You know?
Yeah, they made
Because
assumptions.
because, yeah, the white social worker made assumptions if a Black woman is giving birth, she must be poor.
Needs help.
Yeah.
And maybe they thought you were her like social worker.
I don't know. I went to Paris with her and her two daughters, and I think people thought I was the nanny.
Yeah. You kind of were them.
Or more time I spend with this woman, she is just really out there.
Oh, she's that.
Who?
You know me.
Yeah, she's interesting. The Black people and white people certainly experience America differently, right? I mean, they grew up in different neighborhoods typically, they have different schools, they find different opportunities. They have different amount of wealth, Black Americans still have very little wealth. Like households compared to white households and so on. And what happens when they get stopped by the police? Is very different. And this is this is a Black neighborhood, and this is a particular white neighborhood. Now, those are just examples. You can, find fault with that, but that's a different way to grow up, right?
But then that's one of the things too, is I think that because we generalize
Right.
everything, we can say that's a Black neighborhood, that's a white
Right.
neighborhood, but there are white neighborhoods that look more like the one on the
Right,
left, and there
that's
are
true.
Black neighborhoods that look more on
It's
like those on the
Well, when
right.
when you say those as a Black and white, it's not like, what? How could, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's not like, no, that's crazy. That's a Black park and a white park.
Or is that Latino?
Um,
The writing on.
Yeah.
well, there's Latinos around too.
Yeah.
So there are stark divisions within white America as they view the challenges and opportunities experienced by Blacks and Latinos. And these are deeply felt distinctions. And social class affects this, as we were saying before. So am I lower class? I don't know if you can read this very well. Let's see if I can. I take my glasses off to read it, I think. So who's lower class? Well, let's see here. Oh, I jumped ahead. I mean, do that. So looking at the 2012 numbers for all adults, actually there's a rise of from between 25% to 32% believe they're lower class. And for young people, 39% of young people, 18 to 29, see themselves as lower class. And when you get into the between 30 and 64, which is your kind of prime years, I guess, 33% see themselves as lower class. For whites, 31% are lower class, and Blacks aren't much different. But the same percentage of Blacks and whites see themselves as lower class, but for Hispanics, it's 40%. This, of course, has been very controversial, and this is, how school books are being rewritten in states like Texas and Florida. There are wide racial gaps and partisan gaps on how we see the relevance of studying Black history in America. So 53% of Americans think that it's a good thing to pay more attention to the history and show all the things that have happened with Black Americans. 26% say it's a bad thing, and 21% say it's neither good nor bad. But for Black adults, 75% say it's a good thing to pay more attention to this. And actually 54% saying it's very good. So Black people think we should be paying attention to this, and others don't seem to think
And since that survey was taken, we have states who've now,
It's the banned teaching this, right?
right,
And you can see that it is political. So for Republicans, 46% think it's bad or somewhat bad or very bad. But for Democrats, 78% think it's good. So it's clearly split on partisan lines there. Then the question is, do we need to do a lot, or how much do we have to do to fix America? And on this, about 50% say that there are many inequalities, but we can simply make some reforms. You don't have to do a great deal to fix America. Just, maybe make the police wear cameras or whatever you want to do. And 34% say a little. And 15% say you don't have to do anything. So do we need to, what do we have to do to fix things? And of course, not surprisingly, Blacks are more likely to think we have to fix things drastically. And whites tend not to think that.
and you've talked a lot about Black and white, but I can't help but think that the Latino population is really the fastest growing
Yeah, they show up. on this.
population, and we'll be talking about that next week, won't we, Beth?
Right,
And I think that's a population that has a lot of legitimate concerns.
right. So Hispanics, 30% say a lot more needs to be done. And 28% say that there are inequities, but it shouldn't be that hard to fix. But blacks are, that's more than whites do, right? They see it more than whites do, but blacks, of course, see it a lot more. 58% think a lot has to be done. We have to restructure things to be fair. Have we made much progress? Well, 71% of Republicans say we've made lots of progress in the last 50 years. Things really have gotten pretty good. And 29% of Democrats say that. So it's a very different. So Democrats say, yeah, we made progress, but there's lots more to be done. Republicans are more happy with the way things are now.
I think one of the things that's different is that over the last, if you look back at the last 50 years, there are currently now more, the population's different than it
Right,
was 50
that's
years
true.
ago. Like if you look at those statistics that you had early
Right.
on,
Yeah, lots
it's not
changed.
that we haven't made some progress over the
Right.
last 50 years, but we now have some new things that we have to address,
Right.
seems to me.
Well, we've had a lot of changes in the world.
Right,
A lot of Middle Easterns are now living in
Yeah.
this country.
yeah,
And they're and Europe has changed a lot too with the influx of people fleeing because of war. And we've had, I moved to Wheaton in the 80s and we had a lot of Vietnamese moving in because of through World Relief.
right.
Everybody was giving away cribs. I know that we donated the baby bed and to these families that were coming in. So the world seems to be constantly changing. And now we're getting Ukrainians and Russians fleeing
Right.
from the war
Mhm.
that Putin has caused.
The war.
Yeah, so it seems like it's possible to say we've made progress, but that because of our changing demographic, we still continue to need to make progress.
And it's
You know?
interesting to think about minority groups that we haven't discussed at all, like people from Europe, for example.
Yeah. Europe and the Middle East
Middle
and
East.
Asia and,
Well, Irv and I like to watch European mysteries.
Oh, yeah.
And we love the sweet. Right now, we've been into Swedish mysteries. And it's amazing how the Poles are constantly being.
Yeah.
They are causing.
here's two Polish men
Yeah,
right
well, my
here.
We
husband-
probably deserve it. We
My
probably deserve
husband
it.
is too, but it's
Poles
interesting.
are Polacks.
Well, they didn't call them that. They
Yeah.
call them Poles.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how they blamed them for murders. They blamed them for the
yeah.
changes in their countries. And
Just like us, aren't they?
yeah, there doesn't seem to be any, we're not the only country that's doing it.
Yeah,
And-
of course.
And we know that a lot of Middle Easterners are being blamed for the changes in their economy and the problems of people getting jobs, et cetera.
Doesn't that tell you something? About
Yeah.
human beings?
Human
It
nature,
does,
right.
yeah.
Nature? Yeah.
What we don't know, we're afraid of. And we know that the people that we all make decisions. And if we don't know any blacks or anybody that's different than us, our decisions aren't going to be made the same as people living here in Glen Ellen.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Same thing with
Grow up
sexuality.
With other people, we know them, they're our good friends, we go to church with them.
You know,
And
if you
it's
don't-
so different, and you can't, people have the right to make up their mind and make decisions. No matter where they live, but their decisions are made based on what they experience.
Mhm.
And I grew up not really ever encountering black people from the northwest side of Chicago. And if I'd known any gays, I didn't know I knew any gays. You know, we always accuse people of being gay, but we, as far as actually be, I didn't even know what that meant.
I had no,
We didn't use that word, you know, we used other words at the time.
yeah,
But I think, you know, knowing gay people affects the way you look at that issue more than if it's an abstract thing and you just have ideas about it. But if you actually know people,
changes.
whether you know gay people or you know black people, you know, think all the difference, I think. We're almost out of time, which is almost fine. Do whites benefit? 31% of the public say white people benefit a lot from societal advantages that are not available to black people. 27% they benefit a fair amount, and 40% think white people get no benefit from being white, that there's no advantage to being white in America. And that, I think, must reflect social class. And I'm sure for, you know, poor whites, they don't see any real advantage of being white.
Well, it's just like when we were talking about white privilege, you know, the portion of the white population that is kind of in the lower economic group have a hard time understanding that concept because they don't personally experience privilege
Yeah, they don't see
in many ways.
They probably do.
They do probably in certain ways, but
They don't
they,
get beaten
but
up
they
by
don't feel,
cops with one.
right, but they don't feel that, you
Right.
know,
Mhm.
it's not part of their, I think it's a harder concept to tap into.
But then politically, you know, Democrats are much more likely to see a benefit to whites. They're the blue line at the top, and the red line at the bottom is Republicans. They don't see it much at all.
Do you know if this was organized at all by education? Because
Yeah, I think this was meant to be
there are
kind of random.
education differences between the
Yeah.
majority of Democrats and the majority of.
Yeah. I agree. I think it'd
Probably.
be interesting to,
Yeah, and it must be a factor.
there must,
I think, you
with
know,
the Pew, if the Pew Center's doing all this research, they probably have done that.
yeah, I'm sure they
Looked
have.
at education level.
They're usually pretty good about the research. So what are the benefits of whiteness, and for that matter, what are the benefits of being male? And are there still benefits? I think there are.
Well, speaking of what the wealth inequality, men still get paid more than women.
They're worth it. They bring their man views.
Mansplaining.
Yeah, they can mansplain things.
I wonder how much that is due to the type, not necessarily for equal job, but the type of jobs that women have traditionally been doing as opposed to men.
Well,
One of the,
Relegated to women.
So part of that is, yes, in some, in many families, with kids, women are considered the primary caregivers and find themselves needing to look for work that's more flexible.
Yes, right.
But in many, many cases, so in engineering,
Yeah.
in the vast field of engineering, when subfields of engineering are become more female dominated with biomedical engineering, for
Mhm.
example, a lot more women started going into biomedical engineering and pay rates plummeted compared to
Mhm.
other
Yep.
fields of engineering.
Yep. And that's happened in education, you know, traditionally, elementary education was more dominated by women and
Right.
secondary more by men, and the pay levels for elementary were kept much lower,
Mhm.
even though the educational
Yeah.
level was the same, whatever. And I was just, in my book group on Monday night, a couple women were talking about their experiences. One woman is an associate professor in history at Northern, and she just got like, she's won like Fulbright scholarship. She just got like the Teacher of the Year award, and she has a male colleague who she knows makes more than her, who has been there less time, has
How's that even possible?
And, you know, she said things. Now, I was at College of DuPage and I don't believe, I think it would be harder to do because we were union. But I also saw human resources discount, we had a scale and they discount some of the education and experience that people had so that they could start them lower on the scale and then they're stuck there forever. So if that happened and that so it can happen in different fields.
So they did that to everybody though, didn't they? I mean, they tried to keep everybody as low as they could keep them.
As far as I know,
Yeah.
but you know, I was aware of a male who had a lot less education than I did, was brought in at a higher level, and he had less education and less experience, and he was brought in at a higher level than I initially,
Yeah.
like given more years of experience than I had even though I had more years of experience.
Yeah, you did.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the glass ceiling versus glass escalator.
Yeah.
What?
It's the glass ceiling versus glass escalator.
Yes.
Paradigm, I guess.
Yeah, so I think that there may be the factor of what women do, but it's also because what women do has been devalued.
Well,
So,
I don't doubt that.
so like clerical work, that takes a high level of intelligence and attention to detail and ability to juggle different things. But it's always been lower paid and childcare has always been lower paid. But manual labor has often been higher paid because it's traditionally male.
Also traditional union.
Well, that's true
There's a
too.
lot
And
to
union does, yeah,
Makes a big
yeah,
difference.
yeah, it does.
This
I
is
know.
a quick video. Let's see if it'll play without the sound being all screwy. I don't know. I can't tell you what's gonna happen.
We have to leave.
Okay.
Okay,
That's nice.
Yeah.
thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Bye.
Discussion.
Good to meet you.
You too.
United States. This is what they said they thought it was. Dividing the country in 5 rough groups, at the top, bottom, middle free, 20%.
It's coming through
He
your
asked
thing.
them how they thought the wealth in this country was divided. Then he asked them what they thought was. And 92%, that's at least 9 out of 10, said it should be more like this. In other words, more equitable than they think it is. Now, that fact is telling, admittedly. The notion that most Americans know that the system is already skewed unfairly. What's most interesting to me is the reality.
I can hardly hear it.
Yeah.
Because if he makes it louder, it's gonna reverberate even
Just like
more.
we have this.
As the actual distribution is from what we think exists in this country. So ignore the idea for a moment. Here's what we think it is again. And here is the actual distribution.
Yeah.
Shockingly skewed. Not only do the bottom 20% and the next 20%, the bottom 40% of Americans barely have any. I mean, it's hard to even see them on the chart. But the top 1% has more of the country's wealth than 9 out of 10 Americans believe the entire top 20% should have. Mind blowing. But let's look at it another way, because I find this chart kind of difficult to wrap my head around. Instead, let's reduce the 311 million Americans to just a representative 100 people. Make it simple. Here they are, teachers, coaches, firefighters, construction workers, engineers, doctors, lawyers, some investment bankers, a CEO, maybe a celebrity. Now let's line them up according to their wealth. Poorest people on the left, wealthiest on the right, just a steady row of folks based on their net worth. We'll color code them like we did before, based on which 20% quintile they fall into. Now, let's reduce the total wealth of the United States, which was roughly $54 trillion in 2009, to this symbolic pile of cash. And let's distribute it among our 100 Americans. Well, here's socialism, all the wealth in the country distributed equally. We all know that won't work. We need to encourage people to work and work hard to achieve that good old American dream and keep our country moving forward. So here's that ideal we asked everyone about. Something like this. This isn't too bad. We've got some incentive as the wealthiest folks are now about 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest Americans. But hey, even the poor folks aren't actually poor, since the poverty line has stayed almost entirely off the chart. We have a super healthy middle class with a smooth transition into wealth. And yes, Republicans and Democrats alike chose this curve. 9 out of 10 people, 92%, said this was a nice, ideal distribution of America's wealth. But let's move on. This is what people think America's wealth distribution actually looks like. Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty great. Yes, the poorest 20 to 30% are starting to suffer quite a lot compared to the ideal. And the middle class is certainly struggling more than they were, while the rich and wealthy are making roughly 100 times that of the poorest Americans, and about 10 times that of the still healthy middle class. Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality. Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change. And the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart on this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, 3 stacks, all by itself. This is the top 1% I'm hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. While the richest 1% take home almost a quarter of the national income today. In 1976, they took home only 9%, meaning their share of income has nearly tripled in the last 30 years. The top 1% own half the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50% of Americans own only 0.5% of these investments, which means they aren't investors. They're just scraping by. I'm sure many of these wealthy people have worked very hard for it. But do you really believe that the CEO is working 380 times harder than his average employee? Not his lowest paid employee, not the janitor, but the average earner in this company. The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour. We certainly don't have to go all the way to socialism to find something that is fair for hardworking Americans. We don't even have to achieve what most of us consider might be ideal. All we need to do is wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not at all what we think it is.
So my suggestion would just be that it's possible that this laid on top of race and gender and other things helps explain, we're really fighting over a small share of the country's resources, between us, and the very wealthy have almost everything. So that's just a way to
Really depressive.
cheer you up.
I do, and
Thanks,
that,
everyone.
and it's distressing that wealth just keeps growing and growing among that very small group of people.
We gotta cut
I
the
saw, I
tax.
saw, I saw another video that was really interesting with that concept where he had a pie and said, how much do you think of the pie the wealthiest get? And most people would be like, it'd be a quarter of the pie. It was really like 7/8 of the pie
Right.
was just to the wealthiest, like 5% or something. And then, it's so,
The rest of us are all trying to get a bite. of it.
yeah.
Well, I see myself way at the bottom. And I don't feel like I'm hurting, I don't need to have all that money. And I can't imagine that if I was wealthy, it would make my life any better.
Think of the
Right.
pledge you could make to St. Mark's if you were really wealthy.
Pardon me?
Think
Think of the pledge you could make to
St.
St. Mark's.
Oh, yeah, right. I can make a lot of people wealthy. Help a lot of people with my money, but, so I do it with my time, you know. So I really don't see how, you know, that it's incongruous to see it, but what, you know, you also wonder, well, what the, how can all that money make your life better, you know? I know for the people who are really struggling, it would be good if they had money, and it's our need and requirement to help them, but still.
You know, Beth, I truly believe this, I've believed this for a long time, that it has something to do with, sounds very philosophical, this is a philosopher here, the American ethos of stuff. And so there was an article in the Tribune 2 Sundays ago about some fellow who's buying, they bought 4 lots in Winnetka on the lake. Did you see
Yeah,
that?
no.
He's building a house that's got 83,000 square feet. 83,000, and that's one of his houses. He's got like 5 or 6 houses.
Yeah.
Well, people define their worth by what they have, and so until that changes.
Well, they help people, they employ people, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, I know,
But when they have that much money. I forgot what I was gonna say, but it's just like what,
what's the point?
exactly.
It's very, very,
You
it's
can
I
only
think
be
they
in
have to-
one place.
They have to come up with ways of spending it. And
this
so
is
like,
true.
you know, like 83,000 square feet.
So I hope I.
Wow.
Did I miss anything good?
No, not a thing. It was just me yakking about stuff.
It was
That's
awesome.
the good thing,
Every-
you're yakking about stuff.
I wouldn't say you yak up. No,
We
Everything
just
he-
talked
everything
about
that
some
comes out of his
issues.
mouth is momentum. and-
Yeah, Joyce.
You don't live with them, Diane.
Oh,
Everything I say at home is for better too.
There might be
Is
a
it?
problem, yeah.
God.
I think that's a good bit already. I don't want to do that again. Yeah. No matter who it is.
I love that shirt. That's really cute.
I need to go ahead and
I didn't
shut
even realize
down.
you were still here.
Have a wonderful day, everyone, and I will see you soon in a couple of minutes in the service.
And
Have a
enjoy
jolly
enjoy